Hi folks, welcome to the Creative Nomad, presented by TrueAwesomeLife.com. I'm your host, JP Adkins, and I created this podcast because I want to tell the stories of the radicals, the ones who are out there making the world a better, more beautiful place, the amazing authors, artists, musicians, thought leaders, coaches, and yes, nomads who are out there living their true awesome lives and want to help others do the same. Are you ready to live your true awesome life? Go to TrueAwesomeLife.com and start your journey today. And hello everyone, welcome to the Creative Nomad Show. I am JP Atkins, and today we get to talk with Kimber Bowers. She is such a phenomenal person. And in all full disclosure, she is one of our clients at Quantum Impact. The programs just switched over, so I had to remember. And she's just, I'm so impressed with who she is as a being and who she's trying to, what she's doing in the world and the impact she's really making. She is now, just recently, this week, is released her book and is now an Amazon bestselling author. So, Kimber, where are you at in the world?
I'm in York, Pennsylvania.
Oh, fun. So what's your favorite part about being in New York?
The parks. There are some amazing state parks around here that I like to explore with my kids. Beautiful area to be in.
That is so awesome. And where is that in Pennsylvania? It seems that I know where it is, but Southern?
Southern, yeah.
Yeah, I was born in Norristown, which is just outside Valley Forge, King of Prussia Mall,
Okay.
right there. So it's kind of, and I lived down there for 2 years, and then, well, I lived in Norristown for a year, and then I moved to Center City, Philadelphia. That was a trip. So kind of from around there. I'm from around that parts. So tell me a little bit about your book. You know, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I'm looking forward to it. I do have it, but tell me about it. What was your inspiration?
There's a lifetime of inspiration in that book, really. The book is called Awaken Your Joy, a practical guide to embrace fulfillment. And it really has not all of the stories, obviously, because it would be a much longer book, but some stories from my life that I found or thought would be inspirational to other people. And it inspires mindset shifts. And it also has tools that you can use to implement that thing, because I found in my own journey of healing, because, you know, I come from a history of clinical depression and PTSD and anxiety for really from the age of like 8 to the age of 30. So that's a long time. Yeah. And I explored a lot of things on my journey to healing. And as I did that, I realized that a lot of the information that is out there, we get these things that we know we should believe, that we know make sense to us. Like, you can be told a million times, yes, you are good enough. Would spirit make you any less? And it sounds good, and we want to believe it, but we have trouble really integrating that into our lives. There's parts of ourselves that aren't totally on board with that answer. There's resistance, right? So I found that by giving the mind things that the brain likes to help integrate that, by having exercises and creative processes and doing the journaling and introspection to kind of get your brain on board with those deeper spiritual truths, allows us to better integrate them into our lives, to believe it on a deeper level. Does that make sense?
It really does. It really does. And I have a long documented relationship with depression. Last year, I had a nervous breakdown. Right about almost a year ago this month. So, and I've documented how I've come out of that, some things that I've done. And I really do believe it's about the exercises that you create, right? Those daily systems, So tell me a little bit about, what are some of the daily systems that you do that really help you to kind of prepare yourself for the day?
On a daily basis, well, I have like a morning routine that I do that I feel not everyone needs a routine, but it works for me because it keeps things simpler. And it gives me the space to focus better. So I have a morning meditation and stretching that I do, and I have my breakfast, which is the same every day, and do a smoothie, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then I also, really, my gratitude practice is the biggest thing that I think I do consistently that changes my life, because I've learned to look for things to be grateful for and to be more aware of what is here and what is around me, and take the space to notice things. Observation is a really big tool that I think we overlook, because when we have hyperactive thoughts, we're so stuck on what's happening in here that we're not even noticing the things that are around us. And if we can make the decision to notice, to say, hey, look, that's a beautiful cloud or a beautiful tree or whatever you're walking by right now,
Yeah.
it can shift the focus of all the stuff that's going on in there and help you start to see some of the positives in that as well. It's kind of like a chain reaction gratitude is, where if you notice one little thing, like just be grateful for the fact that you got a shower this morning, and then you start thinking about other things, and it creates the snowball effect, like, oh, I'm grateful that I got a shower, I feel clean, oh, I smell good too.
Yeah.
I can go and talk to people and they might like to be around me. It's just
They
like
might.
a reaction, right? So that's
Yeah.
a huge tool for me.
So what do you find, um, it's funny because I have a practice that includes that. It's part of my nightly journaling process. And so what tool do you use? Do you have a tool? I should rephrase that. Do you have a tool that you use to really help you get centered and focused and looking for the gratitude?
Not really.
No?
I use breath, and I just create the intention to make that space, which is easier now than it used to be, because when I first started working on things like this, I didn't feel like I could make that space. So I might have, at that time, in the past, I've used music or that kind of thing to help, anything that would help soothe me or calm me a little bit. Um, Now it's easier to do. So I don't necessarily need those tools anymore, I don't feel, at this point. But in the past, I did use different tools. I used colors and music and Reiki. I still do self Reiki on myself.
Okay.
Um, but there's things that, it's just a shift that you create over time. I feel like the more that you take the time to, and you can use any tool that works for you, because different tools work for different people. So if there's a particular style of meditation that you like, or maybe it is some kind of beats, or even scents, aromas, our brains all work differently. So whatever can help you get to a place of calm where you can create that space and start to shift those things. But I think it's important to recognize that we're not dependent on those tools, that we can create that space and get to that sense of connection without those tools. We just have to get used to doing it first. So it's building ourselves up to the point where we can really willfully do that, and get to that space of connection on our own. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It really does. It does. I tend to, when I meditate, I really do tend to like music. It's kind of one of the things that I focus on. But I realize out here, when I'm in the RV, um, I hear the leaves much more. It's thinner. So sometimes when I notice the leaves, it's a moment of breath, and there's um, some chimes somewhere local, like so one of my neighbors has chimes somewhere, and they're pretty. And every so often I notice those, and that's a moment to take a breath. Oh,
Right.
that's pretty, you know. So I definitely get both sides of that. Do you have a particular journaling process, or do you kind of wing it when you open a journal?
I kind of wing it. I do have, like, the book has specific journal questions, and I do provide those for clients sometimes. Again, I think that's a personal thing, where some of us can just sit down and write, and other people need direction. Depends how much of a writer you are, I
Yeah,
guess. But writing's something I've always done since, and journal, I've kept a journal since I was like 8, so it's something that I just do.
yeah,
And I do feel that journaling can be a huge help, And I do think it's an individual process. I do have a specific journaling process that to work through it's based on overcoming past trauma and creating better relationships with yourself and others in the now, which is something that I struggled a lot with. And this, I don't call it mine because it was gifted to me. It's something I was guided to do. And that's also found in the book. It's in the biggest chapter, which is releasing the past, because, you know, everybody's got a ton of shit to get rid of.
Oh, yeah.
but,
Tell me about it. And then you find more.
There's steps that I was guided to go through in doing that and figuring out what I needed to release. So that is like a process that I've put together to share with others.
That is so awesome. Have you found that because you've obviously been doing the work for a while, you know, and you've probably heard 5 different versions of how to do the work. Have you found that by listening to all the different ones and kind of coming up with your own works better for you? Or has it been more like, I did this process first and that did XYZ for me, and then I moved forward and did another process?
A lot of my process came from being forced into it. So I wasn't even like looking for the information or listening to anyone else. It was a point where I couldn't go on anymore as I was, and I found something to do, and it worked. So that was, you know, the beginning stages. That later on, when I was looking at bigger questions, like the beginning is working through the past and figuring out who you are and discovering some value in that. And then when you get later and you're a little more aware of other information, right, and more open to it, you might be taking in that information. And that's the point, I guess, where I was at deciding how I know who I am. How do I want to be that? How do I want to show up and express it, right?
Yeah.
So at that point of the journey, I was taking in other information and listening to it. And I do kind of think for myself, I don't necessarily like to follow steps or do as I'm told. That's just my personality. So listening to different things and fusing them together and finding what works for me was suitable to me. Some people like to be given a process they don't have to think about, that they can just do. So again, I think that's a difference of personality.
Yeah, it's actually funny because that came up this week in our program, actually, because as you know, we're always improving the program. You know, once you have a program, you're always improving it. And one of the things that came up for me is that I'm feeling like people aren't planning as effectively as they can. And so I have a worksheet. I actually finished it last night to do that. And it's funny because some of the journaling things that I do, I edit it to this worksheet so that, because it's what works to set you up for that success, in my opinion.
Right.
Now, if anyone uses it, great. If they don't find value in it, I'm sure they can take pieces of it and still find their own system, because I always believe there is no one system for everyone.
Right.
You know, but very much like you know, I had a big trauma and came up with a system that worked for me and wanted to share it with others, because there's so many people out there that are struggling with a lot of this. And excuse Rupert, he decided that he needs to talk too. He has something to say about this. So, you know, so I know that your book leads into, it goes along a lot with your program, your coaching program, because you are a coach.
Yes. I'm a coach and a clinical hypnotherapist, and I take the program is also helping people to sort through, rise above past traumas, and get fulfillment in the now. So it is about knowing who you are. And what I mean by that is that we often tend to identify ourselves through not supportive methods, right? We identify ourselves with our roles, with our responsibilities, with our achievements, with all of these things that can go up and down and are all over the place, and our past, how we've been treated in the past, all of these things kind of get meshed into our identity. So it takes you through getting a firmer foundation of yourself and your own value that's not going to be so wavering, that
Yeah.
keeps you more stable. And that's through identifying through our values and what we feel called to share in the world. And then you actually get to take those and figure out how you want to express them and how you want to show up right now to get the most fulfillment in your life. Does that make sense?
It really does. It really does make sense. And I think that it's so needed, you know, in I see so many people that identify with toxic things like a job. Um, I've been talking about it kind of all week. There's so many other possibilities out there, you know, and the job is the easy one because you hear all the time people go to work and they hate their job, they hate their job, they hate their job. Well, did you put a resume out?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing to get the next one? You know, what do you need for a next job? What is it that you would like to do? Because we so often fall into these default lives. And
Yes, it's limiting. We limit ourselves.
yeah, and I think that it's funny and it's so needed to know who we are so that we can choose what we do because there's a difference, and
Right.
a lot of times people don't actually see that. So what is, you know, I think that there's so much value there, and I'm trying to unpack the right question. So, you know, what have you been seeing? You know, you work with clients all the time. What is it that you see that, you know, people kind of get stuck in? What is the things that people are getting the most stuck around?
Well, a lot of my clients struggle a lot with the shoulds, what they think they should be doing, or what they feel is expected of them. In some cases, what they expect of themselves, because all of it is based not on who they really are and what they want to bring, but on external ideas that have influenced them at some point. So it's this idea. I know that we don't raise children this way intentionally, but somehow it seems to happen. You know, they pick up on, as children, we pick up on expectations from the
Yeah.
outside world, and we translate that as a reflection of our own worth, whether we're meeting these expectations, and we carry that with us throughout our lives. You know, so I mean, you might be 40 years old and still worried about whether you're doing the things to get the A on your spelling paper, you know, like
Yeah.
it's it's just continuous that we have all these ideas of the person we're supposed to be, and it gets in the way of all that we really can be, because a lot of times we haven't even considered the magic that we truly have and the gifts that we really have to bring. I find a lot of people who identify their strongest gifts as weaknesses of some sort, just because they felt it kept them from fitting in at some point or another.
Mhm.
So getting through those judgments and those ideas of what should be, and allowing more of who we really are to come through, and being open to see the goodness in that, is really, I think, the key to everything. It's it really is.
Yeah. I definitely hear that because so often we that's who we are. You know, it's just who we are. It's, looking for, I did it this week, looking for that the A on the spelling test. That's a really great way to, are you still looking for that A on the spelling test? And it so often isn't anything about what you're thinking. It's all this craziness that you've been led to believe, and that if you don't get this, you're not worthy. You
Right.
know, you're not as good as someone else because you're not getting an A, or you're not good enough. You're not good as someone else because, you know, they have more likes on YouTube. You know, the digital world is so much crazier, right? So, and I think it's ridiculous, but it's still the same insecurities that it was back in when I was a kid, right? That
Right.
someone else has better grades, someone else has better hair, someone else has, you know, better clothes, they have more money, they have more. So what is it that you think could help people actually get out of that whole conversation?
I think it's a combination of tools and practice and really reshaping the inner dialogue, but it's a thing that it takes consistent practice. So it gets easier as you go. So the first step is always creating the space to recognize where that's coming up for you, you know, and when you see where it's interfering and when it's coming up, you develop the tools and the techniques to work with it when it's happening
Yeah.
so that you can detach from that more quickly and reshape your mindset and focus on the positive or what you can do instead of getting lost in what's going wrong, you know? And then that gets easier as you go. So the more consistent, the more you commit to, because it's your brain, you have multiple thoughts, you know, a million different thoughts in any given second,
Mhm.
and you're not going to be aware of all of them. But if you train your brain to be more aware of the ones that you are having when you feel bad, like, what am I thinking when I feel bad? Right? Then you can transform those thoughts. You can work with them, you can question them, you can reshape them. And as you do that, it becomes easier so that as you're practicing it, eventually you get to a point where you don't have to think about it and reshape it. It just naturally happens.
Yeah. I, I really do agree with that. One of the tools that I use a lot is called Youper. Have you heard of it?
I have seen you post about it, and I'm going to be honest, I have not looked at it yet.
It's some, you know what? It's one of my tools. You know what I mean?
Right,
It's in my toolbox, and I believe it's one of the things that um and it's all about that. It's all about being the awareness of where you are in this given moment. Okay, and so you check in every morning. So I check in every morning with it. I'm supposed to check in twice a day, according to my, but I typically hit one or the other.
right,
Let's be honest. You're not always perfectly on your systems. You know, I hit one or the other. And if I don't hit in the morning, I do typically hit at night. And so what ends up happening though is that you kind of track where you are emotionally through it, and you kind of look, oh, okay, so this is a bad week. Okay, so this is what was going on this week,
right,
you know, and this is how I was reacted to that. So even more so than the daily, you know, daily tracking is wonderful. And like, but when I've gone back and looked at, you know, last November, for instance, you know, I had a nervous breakdown in September. I started using this in like late September um, into
right,
October. That's when I heard about this. And in November, starting to see where after my mind kind of cleared up enough and stopped being this, you know, and started like uh, allowing me actual thought. Um, what it really was doing and what was the causes of a lot of the things that was going on. And so I find it invaluable, you know, and I know that you have amazing tools in your program. You know, we've talked a little bit about what you have going on, and, you know, I think that more tools doesn't necessarily isn't a bad thing.
right. No, I like that. I like that idea. I will have to look at that. I do a lot of kind of in the moment things
Hmm.
that you would use as soon as you're feeling off. You know,
Yeah,
like there's 3 steps that you do as soon as you're feeling off. But what you were talking about, having that kind of more distant check-in, I think would probably, there's again probably a difference in people and
yeah,
personality, what would be better for someone, because not everyone may be able to stop in the moment, and I hadn't really considered that. So thanks for bringing that up.
yeah. And I mean, I think that for me, you know, how this helped me. So I was going back through in January. I was in a downside. I deal with depression and anxiety, and also, and I was in the roller coaster, right? And I had gotten myself into a decent space through November and December, right? And then I kind of dropped off, like not even like a roller coaster, but kind of a cliff.
Right,
And I'm like, oh, wait a second, there's something happening here. And I was, because of the work I did, I was more aware. Oh, I'm slipping here, and I chose to get medicated this time. Whereas the first time I probably should have hospitalized, and like I realized looking back
right,
how much more powerful that would have been to like really get the intense help that I probably needed at that moment. but really be in that space of, oh, you know what, I'm falling there. And so let's see what I need to do,
Right.
you know. So that's how it helps me. And I know, like I said, I know that you have great tools, and I just think it's just one more in the toolkit that came up for
Right.
me in that space. So what is the one thing that I know I keep going one thing, like there, because it's a million things. It's not one thing. There's not one thing
Right.
at all. Like especially in this, in when you're in that moment, you know, it's never one thing.
Right.
It's untangling
All
50.
of the things.
So what do you find that people can really, in the moment, you know, in that, like when you, as soon as you noticed, what's the first thing that they should do?
As soon as they notice that they're feeling off,
Yeah.
or okay, so well, my thing is that as soon as you notice you're feeling off, you need to separate from the situation. So you stop and take a breath is the first thing to do, and kind of intentionally, willfully release this on the exhale. It doesn't always work, but you try, you know.
Right.
At least you don't get all the space, but you'll get at least a little, you know, maybe a millimeter.
Yeah. You put that crack.
Right. And
Just
when you create that crack,
yeah.
then there's more awareness that can come through. So there's questions that you ask. You know, you ask, what is actually happening? What am I reacting to? And how can I change that reaction? Because a lot of times what is actually happening is not what we're reacting to.
Hmm.
And when we call up that awareness, we can move. And some people, again, because it's an individual process, some people like to ask the question in a more spiritual context, and that's okay. I give two versions of the questions because
Yeah.
there's different types of brains.
Uh-huh.
To help move through that, but it's the same purpose in both of them, recognizing what we're actually reacting to and what we can do for ourselves right now to feel better.
Yeah.
So it sounds really super simple, but I think anyone who's tried to do it knows that it's difficult to do. And that's why, again, it takes practice. And yeah, it might not work the first couple times you do it, but you keep doing it anyway. You keep doing it and you create that space. And maybe you think it's crazy that I'm telling you to ask yourself questions, but you have all the answers. I don't have them. You have them.
Right.
So they are questions that you have to ask yourself. And you do get answers when you create the space for them to come through. Sometimes you get bigger answers than you even imagined there were. So
Oh my
it's
God.
a whole process of unraveling, right?
That's so, it's so funny that you bring that up, because this whole experience that I'm going for, the whole RV thing, came up in one of those moments. So of asking the question.
Right.
And I was working with the Spiritual Life Center of Ferndale. I was doing a whole bunch of stuff. I spoke, I sang, just a whole bunch of different things throughout the time with it. And it collapsed. A couple of our key people passed. It just became unsustainable. And at the same time that my ex and my lover of 7 years and I separated, and my company fell apart. So all within like a month. It was just like life rearranging itself, is what I always say. But I was told to have you. I was asking my spiritual leader, the one that ran the Spiritual Life Center, what is it that I should do? I'm lost. And he said, well, have you taken it into meditation? And I'm like, no, you know, because sometimes you know what to do, but someone says it from you and you haven't done it, like the obvious, right? You haven't asked the question. So I went into meditation. It's clear as you and I are speaking. I heard, get an RV and go. Okay, this is 5 years ago. At
Right.
that point, I'm still going out pretty much, you know, once a week, at least twice a month. I'm going out doing karaoke. I'm part of the community. I'm part of this whole thing. And I'm a city boy. I always said that I don't want a house. I want a condo somewhere that I don't have to deal with yard. I want a nice enough um, deck to put some really nice potted garden. You know, I want enough, like some space. I want to be able to sit outside, just not, I don't want to have to tend anything. So, so me going into an RV is the furthest thing in the world at that moment. And through the years, it's been crazy. Like I've thought about it, you know, it's like, okay, why not? Was the next question, why not? And I gave myself a whole list of reasons why not.
Right.
And, and then I'm like, okay, so why would I? And started that list. And then the next list was, what would it actually take? You know, what does that actually look like? What would I actually do? Could I do it? I mean, I do work mostly digitally. Could I really do this? And when you start asking yourself the questions and asking the universe or God or, you know, however you want to look at that,
Right.
right?
I was just having this conversation with my daughter this morning because I don't even remember what it was. She was getting ready for school, and I'm like, do you have shoes on your feet? No, you didn't give me socks, and I want to wear my boots. I'm like, well, how do you get something? Ask. Okay, did you do that?
Wow, that is the best explanation I have ever heard. Might need to edit that in somewhere and just like post it everywhere. Did you just ask?
So, I mean, we have to ask, right? Those
Yeah,
questions are powerful.
yeah. In 5 years ago, if you would have told me I'd be sitting here, even after I asked and like went through it, I'd be like, hell no. And talk about, you know, going off grid and like completely off grid and all the things I'm talking about doing now. The repairs I've done on this alone by myself are like so changing, like story changing in my life. So it's worth it. That's what I'm
Right,
saying. It's worth asking the questions,
definitely.
you know. And this is the most at peace I've ever been. Maybe not this week. I move in on Tuesday, so maybe not this week. I've had some setbacks and some crazy, you know, that happen, but
But overall, you're doing you, right?
yeah,
And that's where that peace comes from. I think it's when we deny ourselves that freedom to be who we want to be or who we are, that things get shady.
I need to write something down. That whole thing, peace comes. So what I heard you say is peace comes from being who you are,
Yes.
allowing yourself to live who you are.
And the reason why in the program I focus on values and value alignment, it's still not who you are. Your values can change, right? But it's a
Mm-hmm.
sturdier, it's something that changes less frequently. We all have some pretty consistent values at the center of our souls that we feel called to share, that we want to bring into the world. So if we identify through those rather than our roles and responsibilities and the things that we're doing, because those you can bring into anything that you do. You can bring, like, if I want to bring love, I can take out my trash in a loving way. I can go play with the kids in a loving way. I can conduct my business in a loving way. There's anything I want to do, I can do in that way. I can do through that value. So it's something that is more consistent, that we can spread and get fulfillment out of being and expressing in our lives. And
Yeah.
it is who we are, because we all feel called to share different things. We all have, I mean, some of them overlap, yes, but we have, there's some uniqueness to it, and not everyone has the same set of values that they want to prioritize. We all prioritize them differently and choose to share them in different ways. So it's consistent, yet also unique.
Yeah, I think that, wow, that was so powerful. Just thinking about, instead of coming from that space of something that changes, being somebody that is coming from their values. I think that people, if more people actually were conscious of what their values were, I think that the world would be a whole better place, because we're not conscious of them. They're not in our forethought. We don't think about our values. I bet you, if you asked, this might be a fun Facebook post. What are your 3 main core values? And see what people come up with, or if they come up with, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. That's a really good qualifying question for you, by the way. What are your 3 main values?
That's I encourage everyone to come up with a main value statement, but then we express it as, like, mine is, I really am about bringing love and compassion. That is my everything. That is what I shape everything around. So my value statement is, I am the spirit seeking to bring love and compassion through all that I do. Right? So because we're not always going to do it, right? But we can be committed to seeking to bring that. We can commit ourselves to aligning with that, and aligning with it again, and aligning with it again. We grow, right? And we seek to bring it through everything we do, not just through one aspect, not just through one area of life, through everything. Because it's by interweaving that we get that sense of wholeness and completeness and fulfillment in our lives, because we're seeing a reflection of ourselves in everything, not just in the business or just in the home life or this role or that role.
Yeah, it's funny. I call it a being statement. And Oprah was interviewing 50 Cent, right? Curtis Miller. And he said it on there, and it just really resonated with me. And what he said is that his grandmother, at his core, he is his grandmother's grandson. When he remembers that, his life is good. When he doesn't remember that, he gets shot. And, like, literally, that was he's been shot 50 times. That's why they call him. So and then as I talk about this in my normal talk about this, is that my grandmother was crazy, which is true. So it didn't really resonate, although I am my grandmother's grandson in a lot of different ways. But it wasn't the most empowering conversation to have. And through the years, I end up coming up with who I am as a divine space, anchored by my in-breath and solidified by all other sparks of the divine. And then it goes on into a value statement.
Right. I love that.
So everything from there, it's like, okay, I create everything, and the only reason I am is because you are.
Right.
You're observing me, observing you. So that's the only reason we exist. Quantum physics says that we shouldn't be solid.
Right.
There is no reason in the world why we shouldn't fall right through anything. So it's just our awareness that keeps us together. And it's not necessarily our awareness, it's our awareness.
Right. It's the way we all see it.
Yep. So I think it's really funny. It's one of those, like, oh, okay.
Right.
So how can people get a hold of you, Kimber?
Get a hold of me at, gosh, why did I forget that for a minute?
It's like your phone number. I don't know my phone number. I don't call it.
lovinglighthw@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or lovinglighthw.com. Either one reaches me. And you can also find me on Facebook. Awesome. I approve anyone really.
Awesome.
Friend requests.
Yeah.
Unless you're like pointing a gun at me or something, I don't think you'll get through.
I've been a little more selective lately, only because
of these fake accounts and stuff. I know.
The fake accounts and like, really truly, I understand how women feel. I probably got about 25 dick pics in the last 5 days. from people that I just friended.
That's
So
funny.
literally the very first thing they start with is a dick pic. And I'm like, impressive, but not what I'm looking for. But thanks, you know. Not that I wouldn't necessarily, it's not what I'm looking for first. You know what I mean? Not that it wouldn't be something I wouldn't look for, but not what I'm looking for first. Like, say hi, you know, say hi.
Right.
And I now get like 45 or 50 friend requests a day.
Yeah, they have increased for some reason. I think it's like the whole because they do the suggested thing.
Hmm. And now I'm getting, I'm starting to get more followers because I have more followers and I have more engagement. So I think that that is part of the algorithm. As
Right.
the engagement goes up, we start getting recommended more. I know YouTube does. So that it's they tell you it's part of their algorithm. As you
Right.
get views, they will, and people are actually watching it. The more views you get, and the longer they watch the video, that's how they determine if they should be sharing your video.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like if I watch for 30 seconds on a 10-minute video, obviously that video is no good.
Right.
So you know, I got it. That's quick, and Facebook just monitors.
And
Like
they
you
do the
could,
same thing with the books on Amazon.
yeah.
It's by the pages read, they recommend it to other people.
Hmm. Yeah, when you're on Amazon Select,
Yeah.
it's Select. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm like, that's what I did first. I think I was telling you that's what I did first when I first got out of my 9 to 5. Is
Right.
I helped authors self-publish back when self-publishing was still pretty new. Like now, I wouldn't recommend a publisher. Very rarely do I recommend a publisher.
Right.
They keep collapsing. So even the big ones have collapsed at this point. So there's some reasons it goes both ways, but let me let you go because I can ramble with you for hours and you're amazing. And I like, we are so on the same, we are so kindred spirits. I've always loved you
I
and
love you, Jeff.
I can't wait to see you soon. I can't wait to see the amazing things that you put on the world.
I hope.
Don't hope.
We'll see how
That's
it goes.
who you are. Okay, so this is you living into your power, love.
Yeah.
You are who you are is just a divine space. You are such a light in this world. And I think that because of who we hang out with and who we hang around, because you and I run in very similar circles, that we take for granted that so much of the world is like this because we're seeing a lot of the light and a lot of the
Right.
positivity because that's what we surround ourselves by, because we knew that if we surround ourselves by anything else, we start thinking other things, right? Really quickly. So so we forget that we are how powerful that is in the world at large.
You no, you're let me tell you, can I tell you a quick story?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so last night I got this Facebook message from a girl that I don't think I've spoken to in 2 years. And I used to work with her a really long time ago. I was working a part-time job in a bakery, and she saw something about my book, so she was asking if she could get, a print copy of it. And she said to me, I still do the "what would Kimber do" thing. And I was
Wow.
like, what? And she's like, when I'm feeling, when I start to feel stress or whatever, I ask myself, what would Kimber do? I was like, what am I, Jesus? I don't know. Like, what's going on here? What would Kimber do? And she's like, no, it's what I do. I ask myself, what would Kimber do in this situation? And that helps me calm down. And then I can focus and choose on the next best thing to do.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't know. It was totally random, but I was like, wow, I was like, well, you do realize you're doing that for yourself, right? And she was like, what? And I'm like, that's great if that's what works for you to do that. But I said, do you get answers when you ask? And she said, yes. And I said, well, you realize those are your answers. Even if you're framing them as me, those
Yeah.
are your answers that you are coming up with to get you through that situation. And she was like, I never thought of that. And I was like, well, yeah, that's you. You're doing that. Take that credit, take that step. That's a huge, huge step forward for you, because she was a mess when we worked together. Not to be mean, but It's just,
There,
where you are at the time. So I
and that,
was,
yeah, who you are in that moment
but
is,
it's this, I didn't realize I was doing anything for her at that time. You know what I mean? So well, like you're saying, it's easy to forget um, that where we're coming from might not be where everyone else is,
yeah,
and that we can be having that impact.
yeah. And it's funny because even way back, I remember when the What Would Jesus Do bracelets came out. Um, there was Okay, story time. So I lived in a hippie commune for a minute. That's the only way to explain it. It was the craziest time of my life. It's a year I wrote about it in The Awakening. My book is centered around it with a vampire story over top of it because you wouldn't believe it was real life.
That's
And
cool.
almost everything in this book happened. Maybe
Wow.
not in the way that
Yeah.
it's portrayed, but really did happen in that frame, right? So one day I'm sleeping, there was this lounge in the living room, and everyone you came over, this was like a communal house kind of thing. And really, I still can't find words to explain what was happening. It wasn't necessarily a flop house, like my mom would call it a flop house, but it really wasn't. It was a select group of people that pretty much had access to the house at any time, and we called them the circle. And, I had a bedroom. I actually lived there. I started not living there, and then when I realized that, I started thinking about how much toothpaste they had to go through when I was at the grocery store and how much the toothpaste was, and picked up some. It started like, maybe I should actually live here, like officially. So someone came in, and um, the way that we put it is that he found Jesus. Like, all of a sudden, 9/11 was a conspiracy. Um, like, all this stuff, like things that, and how Jesus is going to come back and save the earth, and became like, which like on the radical side of this, of the whole conversation, right? And he left, and everyone thought I was sleeping. I was laying on the lounge, and I wasn't quite lucid. I probably had drank a little bit too much. Or other things. So, and I'm sitting here, and as he left, they said something, and I said, "And the Lord," because like every other word that he said was "and the Lord." So I became the Lord. Became one of my nicknames, Lord Jiffy, which was my other nickname. So when those bracelets came out, everyone said, "What would Jiffy do?" Because, and some of the answers that people would say were absolutely ridiculous and not what Jesus would do at the time. Now it'd be more empowering. Who I become has been much more empowering, and you should like maybe think of what I should do. Then it's not a good idea. It was probably not a good idea. So back when I was young and fun. Oh, but I just think that brought that up for me so much. Like, oh yeah, they used to say that all the time. It probably wasn't as empowering as it was for you. Although people from that era said that I was one of the best people and influential people, so I do understand. Um, one of which is now getting ready to start a new streaming service and requested me to do a show in it.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's getting ready, like the launch of television network, basically a web version of a television network that he's working on getting in the Roku and all the different stuff right now, and to launch. So he wants me
That's
to do a show.
exciting.
So this show may actually end up being on there.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So just a random
It's weird
things.
how random connections work out like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I left that job. I left that company in 2013. So that gives you an idea of how long ago it was. And I have like 7 or 8 people out of 15 that contact me at least once every other week or so from then. it was, you can't recreate that. And as a matter of fact, as soon as I left, it fell apart. And it's actually worse off now than it was when I took it over, which it was on the chopping block when I took over. So it's kind of funny. Look back, you know. But I love you. Like I said, I could talk to you for another 5 hours. We would have a conversation that would go off on tangents all over the place. But I look forward to working with you, and I look forward to. I really do look forward to seeing who you are and seeing that more amplified in the world. All your continued success. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
I look forward to talk to you soon.
All
Love you.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.